Hello there, everyone. So glad to be here today to talk about truth telling in leadership roles. And specifically for right now, it's probably going to focus more on some nonprofit board leadership, is what I'm going to be thinking it. But I think it probably applies in other leadership roles as well. But, we'll see as we go along and the stories that I choose to tell evolve. Uh, Welcome. My name is Patricia. I am here to help you celebrate you every day in every way as we have conversations about leadership, about um, advocacy, about building relationships, and about self care, right? So here's the thing. I have served on a number of nonprofit boards down through the years, as well as having served in leadership roles for work, you know. And I think I counted, I don't know why I was counting. I think someone had asked me. And so I went through, was trying to count, and I kind of lost count. I think it was over 20, um, probably in as many years, probably longer, a little bit longer. But since I probably started serving when I was in my early 20s, but I shocked myself. And it wasn't just that, it was the number of not just serving on the board as a board member, but where my skill set started coming into play and my experience in serving on boards and leading in those roles came into play, that I served as officers on many of those boards, and on as the chair, as the board chair for several of them. And let me tell you, I got stories to tell. I can't tell them all. I cannot tell it all, but I can talk about the scenarios and the situations. And one of the things that keeps coming up for any and all of them, whether they were good experiences or not so good ones, is that the responsibility as a leader to tell the truth about what you see and what you're observing and your inputs from your previous experiences, like that is required. It's required, it's mandatory, because here's the bottom line: whatever type of board or service you're engaged in, you have a fiduciary responsibility, right? To make sure that things are running appropriately, or as to the best of your knowledge are running appropriately, that you are taking the rules and the situations that you're engaging in seriously, and that they fit for where you are at that time, right? And I have learned over the years that everybody not doing that. They're not necessarily willing. I won't say that they're not able, but they're not necessarily willing to engage in the level of truth telling that's required in order for things to truly be running at their highest level, which is a loss for the organization. It's a loss for the people around you, a loss for yourself as well, because when you engage in that level of really accountability conversations, it just raises the level of conversations for everyone and about all the things. So here's the thing. I've, like I said, served on a number of boards, have served on some recently, especially in the last, oh gosh, man, it's only been 5 years, 5 to 6, 7 years, where there have been like some serious issues to develop, to come up, that were faced. And of course, the timing of some of that coincides with these more recent boards, with that of 2020 and all that was going on in the world during that time. And so, yeah, it was tough times for everybody and making hard decisions. And then as we came out of that, it didn't just disappear, right? You lost people, you lost executive leadership, you lost people who were willing to serve not just on the board, but in the lead staff roles, because they were like, I just realized I'm tired and I'm burnt out and I'm out. And who could blame them, because it was one of the toughest times in history to be in leadership. And unfortunately, it kind of hasn't gone away, because especially for us here in the US, the things that are going on in the political environment have absolutely affected the leadership roles on in organizations, on boards, nonprofit boards especially, and have affected them from a financial standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, from a policy standpoint. I'm like, it's a lot going on, a lot. And I know for myself, I've had to be guarded is not the word I want to use, but I've had to be protective. Protective is the word I want to use, because I do have an expanse of relationships, an expanse of experiences, that really and truly can feed into most anything that comes my way. I don't, I guess I will say, very little surprises me these days. It might be the fact scenario that really takes me off, but the underlying matter of how you address it generally comes back to some core principles, some core things, maybe requiring some creativity, definitely requiring some hard decision making. And it often boils down to the people on the board or in the leadership roles who are like, so are you going to say it, or am I going to say it? I've literally been in those positions where it was those things. I mean, I remember at one board meeting where I was sitting there and my hand fell into my head based on the conversations that was going on, and I just couldn't take it anymore, and I started scribbling a note to hand off to a leader, another leader, to say, we got to talk, because this is not good. And sometimes that's the way it goes down, right? It goes down because it needs to be a private conversation first with someone. Other times, there's no putting it off. Like, it may be something that is so impactful, that can literally change the direction of how a decision is about to be made right then in the moment, that something needs to be said right then at that time. And that's where real leadership comes into play, is recognizing when um, action needs to be taken and it doesn't need to be delayed. Like, it needs to be taken at that moment, and to make sure that um, something doesn't go astray, right? Something does not go astray. We've got a little cricketness going on with our camera here, so we're going to fix it, hopefully. I don't know what's going on. That's interesting. This is what happens when you are so busy trying to check things quickly that you don't check all the things, and some of them, and that's going to bother me, but it's going to be okay. This is what happens when you're doing your own thing on the fly. So that said, um, I think some of my key takeaways down through the years have really focused on um, awareness, like being not just awareness of an issue. That's that leads the way, right? You got to know what's going on in your organization. So first, I'll be clearly, if you're not aware of what's going on in your organization, then that's a self check that needs to happen. And where, if you're not able to keep up with what's going on in your organization, then maybe you need to step away. That's a whole different conversation. But that said, awareness of what's going on externally, but also the awareness of situational. It's like, okay, here's the issue, but like, what's going on around us that may impact that? Who's having conversations what's going on in the background that we may or may not uh, be aware of. And sometimes those things alone will cause you to recognize there's an issue, there's a concern, something needs to be said about it, but I need a few more facts before I say something. And I've done that a ton of time where I absolutely recognize like something is off. I'm not sure what it is yet. So I'm just going to hold my tongue for a few more moments till I can get some more facts, right? Um, and so that's one of those things. But here's the thing, you have to be able to follow up. All of these things require action in some way and not just waiting for someone else to do it because that is not being a leader, right? I know sometimes when you're serving on a board, there are people who don't have as much experience, or maybe it's even their first time, or they're new to this particular leadership role. And so they maybe were quiet. I don't think you should take their silence as acceptance for what's going on. I know that when I've stepped into a role or an organization that I'm just getting exposed to, I may not jump right in because I'm trying to learn the lay of the land, right? And as I'm doing that, I'm just being very observant, and I may make a list of questions that I will ask someone offline, and come back to, and then keep it moving, and then figure out, okay, does this need to be brought up in a larger environment? And sometimes, particularly when you're doing board leadership or board service, you've got opportunities to engage during committees where a lot of discussion is supposed to happen before it leads up to the full board. You've got perhaps opportunities to have conversations with other board members one on one, if that time is provided or you create that time. Also, if perhaps let's say, you have a good relationship with some staff, you got to be careful about that. I don't necessarily go that route all the time, and I have, the unique opportunity experience to have been doing this in such a long time that literally normally I do have a strong enough relationship with staff, not just where I could go to them if something comes up, but a lot of times they will come to me, asking like, hey, yes, we need your input on this. And I don't take that for granted. I don't abuse that, because that reputation, that experience has served me well over the years and allowed me to engage in thought leadership, to be a strategic sounding board, in some really, critical situations. And that leadership and that input honestly have been moments where I was not even trying, but it led to my being able to earn the trust and business of fellow board members in a whole different situation that came down the line later, right? So that's one of my reasons, and that's a whole different conversation about why I'm a huge advocate of nonprofit board leadership as a professional development tool. And I look forward to being able to share that in another conversation. But when it comes to this issue of truth telling in leadership, when things are getting tough, or maybe you're making big moves, but things are moving kind of fast, you want to be able to ask the right questions. That's one of the next issues: is, are the right questions being asked? And if there's just silence and things are just moving right along and no one's asking questions, sometimes it's kind of, like, hey, let me stop. I don't know that I know the right question to ask, but maybe you all can tell me some of the questions that came up in the course of making this decision to take that action. Do you see what I did there? And so sometimes that's the thing, but just to cause the pause, especially if you feel like this is rushed, something's going unanswered, you're not quite sure what the question is to ask, acknowledge that, right? Just because you're a leader, just because you're involved in the decision making process, doesn't mean you always have the right answer or that you know the right question to ask in order to get an adequate answer. Sometimes you just have to acknowledge, I'm not sure what the question is, but I know there is one. So right now, I'm just going to ask you what other things have come up that we may not have discussed here yet. So that's one of those things. As you're digging and starting to realize, you know what, I really need to engage a little bit more, that's when you can make a very strategic decision about the question you're going to ask when, or the statement you're going to make, you know, at a committee meeting or at a board hearing, a board meeting, I mean, and or to approach staff with. And I've done literally all of those things down through the years, depending on the situation, right? Now, there are people, and I do not advocate this. I don't like these people. When I don't like it when people do this, where they were literally just it's like throwing gas on a fire and just throw out stuff just to be contrary. That is not that is not an efficient use of anybody's time, especially if you're not offering a solution to this fake problem that you're raising, right? That really drives me crazy. That'll get me to respond and say something fast, probably more than some blatant problem that no one's questioning. All right, that's probably the one thing is when someone's just being contrary. You could all tell it, and quite frankly, people just want to move along. And I've been known to be the person to say, respectfully, person, I disagree, or I think we might want to listen to some more of what's going on before we jump to those types of conclusions. Um, that gets a little bit into the advocacy conversation about speaking up, um, in times of need as well, right? Yes, we all want to get to the truth, to the bottom of a situation, and you have to ask good questions. Good questions that can lead to answers that we may not like, but they still need to be asked, right? And questions that hopefully can generate a conversation that then leads to a solution that everyone can agree to. I know in a couple of my situations that I've dealt with recently, where there's a lot of transition. Thank goodness, we've got things moving again, and um, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done to address problems of the past, so that uh, we can move forward, right? And it's not a matter of a blame game or something like that, but it's literally like, okay, here are the questions, here are the situations, or not just ignoring, like, oh, that was in the past, we just can't talk about it, because it absolutely has helped lay the foundation for where you're going. And sometimes you need to dig some of that stuff up, throw it away, and replace it with a more solid foundation in order to move forward, right? And that is part of being a leader who is seeking the uh, solid solutions for the organization that you're serving, and asking the hard questions and having the hard conversation, and then acknowledging, yes, I'm asking these hard questions. I'm saying, raising some issues that haven't been raised before, it doesn't seem like, but I'm here for helping to find a way forward to help uh, design a solution that meets the need of where we are and where we need to be and where we want to go, right? It's the full package. Don't just come in there throwing stuff and then deciding to retreat and not engage in the work and the process, because that's not good leadership either. I'm just going to call it. And I will tell somebody that too. It's like, you don't get to just throw stuff in there and then walk away and not engage in the work that needs to be done to clean it up. Um, that reminds me of a situation. This was a professional situation. where um, that literally happened. It was a pretty nasty situation. And I recall having to I was on the staff side at the time, and I recall having to talk a board member off the ledge because they were not wanting to show up for a crucial vote. And if they weren't there were others that weren't going to be there, but they had legitimate excuses, conflicts or something like that. But this person didn't have, they just didn't want to make the hard vote. They did not want to be a part of the hard vote, but they had been a part of the organization when the problems that were being addressed currently had arisen. And I just had to have a really, really tough conversation as staff, the lead staff on this. I was like, hey, I'm cleaning up y'all's mess. The least you can do is come in here, have the conversation, and take the vote to fix it. Bottom line, right? But, when politics are involved, the situation changes. And here's the thing, I'm going to say that, and that's, when you're talking about politics from from a work perspective and how that can seem different, I have learned over the years that the politics, even on a nonprofit board, can be just as big and challenging. It's just a little more understated, let's say, or you've got these undercurrents, perhaps. So it's not seeming to be influenced as directly, but there's definitely it. So don't think there's not politics in nonprofit leadership. There absolutely is, in internal and external. And again, we're talking about coming back to that awareness and being willing to tell the truth, ask the questions that get to the truth, and then standing up for the truth. And man, I just said that, huh? Like, be aware of what may be really going on, asking questions about it, and then standing up for it to address the situation. And that can be one of the biggest challenges. I have quit board leadership roles behind it, right? When I recognize that, you know what, this role is no longer for me because the direction in which this is being handled or where I see it going means this is where I get off. This is where I get off, right? And that's not running away, because if I felt like I have contributed all that I can to the situation in the role that I have, on the board in the leadership role, then it's time for me, and that is now time for me to move on, especially if I feel like the actions where things appear to be heading are out of alignment for me. And generally, I don't make some big hoorah about it. I normally have a conversation with the board chair. I have a conversation with the staff leader, most of the time, unless, my issue is with one of those people. And then I'm like, hey, I'm out. There's not going to be a long, drawn out conversation. But again, I can say that and do that because I have decades of experience in getting to that. So let's say what does it mean for the person that maybe you don't have the decades of experience or the confidence in approaching some things in a much more hardcore manner, because I'm pretty hardcore at this state. Then I think it's still the same truth. It just may be you building that muscle, because again, truth telling and engaging and speaking up and all of that, that's a muscle that has to be exercised in order to get stronger. And so again, it doesn't have to be contrarian. It doesn't have to be, what's the word? All in your face. Because some people are adverse to, I'm losing my words. Some people are adverse to, controversy. They don't take it well. Whatever. That doesn't mean that you don't get to address the issue. So be aware. I think for any person in a leadership role, whether you're a newbie or very experienced, it boils down to situational awareness, keeping your eyes open, paying attention to what's really going on around you, not just accepting something and moving on, um, asking questions, right? Whether that's offline and privately, whether it's asking questions in the midst of the board meeting, or whatever is going on, the decision making process, and then acknowledging where you have concern or where you may need more information before you can make a decision. Or if the vote's going to go either way anyway, if they, let's say people are like, well, no, we really need to move along. Hey, guess what? Abstaining is a thing. I have done that as well. I have given notice to folks, to leadership, to people, because again, I know that from my years of experience, my taking an action unannounced like that in a meeting can derail some things because I know that people look up to me for what I have to offer and what I have to say. So if I know that there's a potential decision come down the road that the board chair or the staff leadership is really wanting to move along, I will give them notice. I'm like, hey, heads up, based on what I know right now, I'm either going to vote against this or I'm going to abstain from voting on this. Because I don't think I can vote for it right now. And that in and of itself has has pulled back and made people like, wait, maybe we need to talk a little bit more about this, right? You do have the ability to, um, use. That's not the word what I was saying. I was about to say use the power that you have, but it is right in order to engage. Because again, this is a responsibility. There's a level of accountability in all of this that requires you to get to the bottom of things and to ask the questions that matter, to ask the questions or bring up the issues or concerns that you see so that everyone can have a more informed decision making process. Because that's really what matters, right? A lot of times I've been in those situations, I'm in one or two of them now. You can't resolve the problem or the situation like overnight. It's just not going to happen. However, that does not mean you don't engage in the conversations where you're doing that digging and you're pulling some things to the light so that you can say, hey, this is where we need to lay a new foundation. What do we, while we're still moving forward here, what do we need to do in order to be assured that we get to the place where we really want to be in the future, making adjustments along the way? That's what good leadership looks like. That's what good leadership is supposed to do, right? And oftentimes you got to be willing to tell the truth. You got to be willing to engage. You got to be willing to ask the questions in order to get there. And if you don't, then if something goes awry, that means there's a problem to be fixed later on down the road. It's not necessarily about being able to say, well, hey, I told you so, but it's about being able to acknowledge from your situation, from your perspective, you did what you could to contribute to the conversation. And then how things move along after that, then they do, right? So anyway, all that to say, I could talk a whole lot about this. I have to be careful and not share too many details of some things. Some of them are, they're a matter of public, but it's not about shaming organizations or whatever. It's about me sharing my perspectives on the experiences I've had, real experiences, not fake ones, like real ones that I've had, and the observations I've gained, or the observations I've made, and the things I've learned along the way, so that hopefully it can help someone else be able to get a head start on not making the same mistakes or on saying, hey, I actually do have the ability to speak up a little bit more, to ask more questions, and to do so without feeling intimidated or guilty or shame because it's like, well, I don't want to interrupt the process. Whatever. Sometimes the process needs to be interrupted. All right. Okay. So that's it for today. And where are we? Oh my goodness. tomorrow I look forward to sharing my insights from my first full week of this newest project. I'm kind of looking forward to it, and hope you'll join me. All right, take care. Have a fantastic afternoon.